Welcome to today's explainer. Look, if you're a manager, a leader, a coach, basically anyone whose job is to develop other people, you've absolutely hit a wall at some point, right? Today we're diving straight into an incredibly practical toolkit from Fred Clements' book, 30 Coaching Tools and Approaches That Actually Work. And we are going straight to the absolute bedrock of his approach, the foundations of coaching practice. We're going to figure out how to stop just, handing out advice and actually create the conditions for real meaningful change in our conversations. So let's start with a really common workplace problem. Think about the very last time you tried to help an employee or a colleague get unstuck, but the conversation just went nowhere. Maybe it was unclear communication, a total lack of confidence, no ownership of the issue, or maybe just really low trust. The person is stuck, their thinking is stuck, and your usual leadership advice, it's just not cutting it. Why does this happen to us so often? Well, the issue usually comes down to how we respond. When someone brings us a problem, our natural instinct, our knee-jerk reaction, is to rush right in with an advice-heavy response. We just want to fix it. But as Clements points out, while that might be okay in a literal crisis, in a developmental conversation, it actually stops the other person from thinking. It creates this loop of dependency, a developmental coaching response. On the other hand, that builds confidence, it builds ownership, and it builds resilience. Okay, here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll cover the workplace coaching challenge, the 5 foundations, why they matter, applying them in practice, common pitfalls to avoid, and finally seeing these foundations in real action. Section 1, the workplace coaching challenge, moving from telling to thinking. In modern workplaces, that old school command and control style of leadership, it just doesn't work anymore. Think about it. If every single answer has to come from the manager, the organization becomes incredibly slow and honestly pretty fragile. We've got to shift from just telling people what to do to actually helping them think for themselves. And the absolute key here is that we have to slow down. When you rush in to give advice, you are actively stopping that person from thinking and taking accountability for their own challenge. These foundations of coaching, they exist to do one thing: slow the conversation down just enough so that real insight and useful thinking can actually emerge. Moving on to Section 2, the 5 coaching foundations, the bedrock of real change. Now, you might already know some really fantastic coaching models like the GROW model or maybe Fred's PACES model, but before you pull out those advanced techniques, you need an architectural bedrock to hold up the heavy lifting. Because if the ground beneath your models is weak, the whole conversation just completely collapses. This is where Fred Clements synthesizes the core elements of coaching, which are heavily influenced by the work of Julie Starr, by the way, into 5 solid pillars that hold up the whole coaching house. We're talking rapport, listening, intuition, questions, and feedback. When these 5 foundations are strong, that's when your coaching goes from okay to genuinely transformational. Let's just quickly run through these core habits. 1, build genuine connection. 2, listen deeply, like really deeply. 3, use your intuition. 4, ask powerful questions. And 5, give honest feedback. These are the non-negotiable baseline conditions that literally have to sit underneath all effective coaching practice. Which brings us to Section 3, why the foundations matter, the pressure test. Now, you might be looking at those 5 pillars and thinking, okay, that sounds pretty basic, right? But why are they so absolutely crucial? Well, as Fred Clements writes, and I love this quote, foundations are not tested on calm days, they are tested when pressure comes. Because let's be honest, it is so easy to look like a genius coach when a conversation is simple and the person you're talking to is super open. But strong foundations, they are vital when things get emotional, when someone gets resistant, confused, or defensive. That's when you need way more than just a favorite model. You need an unshakable bedrock. Okay, Section 4, applying foundations in practice, the 5 pillars. Let's really see how this builds one pillar at a time, starting with how we establish that initial base of trust. Pillar number 1 is rapport. Now, rapport is not just about making small talk about the weekend or trying to be everybody's best friend. It is the fundamental relational foundation of coaching. It means creating a truly safe, respectful human connection. Without it, the person simply won't feel safe enough to tell you what's actually holding them back. It's that simple. Pillar 2 is deep listening. And listening isn't just, hearing the words while you secretly plan out what you're going to say next. It is listening for meaning. You're tuning into emotion, shifts in their energy, tiny hesitations, and crucially, you are listening for what is not being said, which creates the space they need to find their own aha moments. Next up, Pillar 3, Appropriate intuition. This one is super interesting. Sometimes you just sense something, right? Like a weird mismatch between a person's words and their tone of voice. And you notice it way before you can logically explain why that's your experience. Talking. But you've got to handle it carefully. You don't just declare it as an absolute fact. Instead, you offer it really lightly, just as an observation for them to chew on. Pillar 4 is effective questions. Look, not all questions are created equal. If you're just asking leading questions, you're basically just giving advice wearing a disguise. A genuinely good coaching question, it completely opens up their thinking. It invites real reflection and drags the conversation out of a surface level complaint and into a deep, actionable solution. And pillar 5 is feedback and observations. In a coaching setting, feedback isn't about telling someone off or giving them a formal performance review. Not at all. It's about holding up a mirror. You're respectfully pointing out a pattern, a hidden strength, or maybe a contradiction that they just haven't noticed in themselves yet. Section 5. Common pitfalls to avoid when the bedrock cracks. So, what actually happens when we get impatient, skip these basics, and rush straight to our clever little models? Well, it triggers a total domino effect of failure. Think about it. If you skip report, there's zero safety, so they won't tell you the real problem. No deep listening, you end up solving the entirely wrong issue, ignore your intuition, and you'll miss the real emotion driving everything. Poor questions just keep it all superficial. And with no feedback, those negative patterns just keep repeating on a loop. The smartest coaching models in the world will just shatter under pressure if these cracks are there. Section 6. Foundations. In real action, weathering the storm. Let's actually put this into a real-world scenario so we can see how these theoretical foundations hold up during a highly pressured, totally stuck interaction. Imagine you've got an employee who absolutely refuses to speak up in meetings. Instead of just telling them, hey, be more confident, a coach using these foundations might ask, I may be wrong, but I wonder whether there's an assumption here that you have to keep everybody happy. Does that fit, or am I off track? Just look at the skill packed into that one sentence. The coach used deep listening to spot the assumption, intuition to sense the pressure they were under, and offered it so lightly, am I off track, to maintain that crucial rapport. And because that foundation was so strong, look at the response you get. The coachee finally feels safe enough to articulate the real issue. They say, yes, I worry people may expect more from me if I start speaking up. Boom. The coach's foundational approach created the safety needed to uncover the true underlying fear that was causing all that stuck behavior in the first place. And this answers our opening hook perfectly, doesn't it? A stuck conversation relies on giving rush advice to surface level problems. But a breakthrough conversation that uses these 5 foundations to take a defensive, uncertain interaction and transform it into a profound, forward-moving realization. So what's the big takeaway here? The basics are literally never basic. True transformational coaching requires constant, ongoing maintenance of this bedrock. You absolutely don't have to be perfect, but you do need to be present, you need to be curious, and you need to be committed. Keep the foundations strong because everything else builds right on top of them. This has been an explainer on just the first chapter of a seriously practical toolkit. Before we wrap up, ask yourself, the next time a team member comes to you totally stuck, are you just going to hand them the answer, or are you going to build the foundation for them to find it themselves? For more information, head over to ClementsConsultancy.com to buy a discounted PDF copy of the book, or head over to Amazon for the ebook or printed version.